Thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This is a scene stamped out on dark matte blue cardstock, and it's just a pre-folded card. And I've stamped on it in black inks, embellished in pigment inks and gel pens, and just with a very, very limited range of hue, media, and values to work with, I think we can create a really deep sense of space within this given format. And I really like the look. It has kind of like a, I mentioned in the video, kind of an ethereal look to it, you know, with these little wisps of pigment ink in here to represent kind of, you know, just some moisture in the atmosphere and the sky, you know, and adding it down here in the water, kind of mirroring what's going on above, but in the form of the waves here. It gave me a chance to use my big Seaside Cove stamp in its entirety, which I don't do too often. Okay, see how big it is? It covered the whole thing. But a pretty simple composition. I think it looks fairly complex, though. We're talking about 1, 2, 3 designs, and then 4, 5, 6, okay, in the foreground. I put these little pebbles down there. You don't really see them too much, but they add a little bit of subtle textures down here. But, you know, in reality, you could really just go 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 4 stamps on here. You know, that covers pretty much a whole full page spread. Okay, so the pigment inks and the streaks in the, you know, the sky and water do a lot of the talking, you know, in terms of creating imagery up there. But you know, it's a pretty simple composition, and the technique is pretty simple as well. I guess I didn't count that one. That quote stamp's a different one too. But as far as the foundation of that goes, sequential aesthetics, I've talked about that before in a card matting process that I was doing before, but this is a card that you'd be getting something like that. Someone would be pulling it out like this. So you want, you know, this composition to read like that, somewhat, and then they turn it around at the back like that, and here's another composition in itself. Hopefully it looks good just standing as a standalone composition, but then they open it up and they get, you know, your full 2-page spread like this. And then what I've done in this card is I've gone in and, you know, the when it is darkest we see the stars. That quote stamp was kind of an afterthought, but, you know, I had some space out there that wasn't too busy with imagery or tones in the background. So I stamped that in white ink. So it really sets the theme of the card, when it's darkest we see stars. So taking this kind of upper area theme in mind and carrying it around to the interior like this. I just put a few streaks of black ink in here, kind of, you know, added these little stars in here. There's my little comet just drawn in there with the white gel pen dots, just to carry out the theme. And then you can, of course, do your, you know, quote stamp or something like that, or if it's an occasion, you know, where you're giving a card to someone, you can stamp that in here. And then you can write in, you know, white gel pen in here, which would look really good. There's just my signature there to see what that writing would look good, look like on dark paper. But just a really fun scene to do. And one of the things I mentioned in this scene is it looks a little bit lighter than it really is in person, because I have these lights coming down. It's kind of glary, but you can kind of see when I hold it up like this, you know, and take the glare out, it's a little bit darker than it would look like through most of this video, so keep that in mind. But this process right here, I think it's a pretty complex one looking, but in actuality it's a really easy and forgiving technique, you know, in terms of adding all those inks in here, just because everything is so dark. So when you're adding the black in here, I don't know, it really blends very easy for me. And then going back in and doing some streaking with some pigment inks and whatnot goes on beautifully, and you can kind of buff it out and kind of move it around a little bit like that too, with your finger or whatnot. Just a lot of fun. Everything looks kind of weird up to a certain point, I noticed, you know, in doing this technique. on darker paper. Looks weird in terms of some of the textures that you kind of achieve initially, and even the imagery looks kind of weird without all the little pigment embellishments like that, but it's really fun to go in and kind of define things, you know, with just your, you know, very complex tool of a cotton swab. You can use sponging technique with these, or cosmetic sponges, but just a lot of fun to finish off this type of scene, process, and I don't know, the media. So anyways, if you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Okay, I thought I would do a little experiment here involving what could be the largest rubber stamp in the world, at least as far as art rubber stamps go. This one's called the Seaside Cove. I did a video on this one a while back showing some different applications. Normally I don't use it in its entirety, but I'm going to stamp kind of a front-back card here, utilizing this stamp. This is a pre-folded card, so there's this kind of crease down the middle already. That's why I bought those cards. So it's not going to print right here because this is going to be a raised ridge. So be it, you know. I think I'm going to stamp this one out in a VersaFine, I think. There's a question in my head if I want to do that, or maybe I'll go with the Marvy. I was just saying VersaFine because I wanted something really deep and black, but I think what I'll do is I'll just re-ink my Marvy black. Go with your favorite black, whatever that might be. Everyone has a different favorite or multiple favorites that they like to use. I happen to be using dye-based ink in this case. Just make sure, you know, if you're doing something like this, I would recommend having a nice juicy pad to go with, and we'll see how that goes. I say that because I'm stamping on a dark cardstock, so we'll want, you know, to get a nice dark impression. Okay, this is really juicy. I'd normally wait for that to settle in a little bit too, but oh, let's just go with it and see what we come up with. Okay. Alright, now my general concept of this scene is that I wanted something to work around this breaching whale. Okay, and I was thinking about doing something kind of, or trying to go for something interesting in the sky. Kind of like one of those things, you know, you've seen these movies where there's, oh, someone out at sea, you know, shipwrecked or something like that. They're floating out at sea, and, you know, they're witness to something kind of magical, and it's typically at night, be it a whale breaching or something interesting up in the sky, you know, completely, they're moonlit, you know, full moon type of situation rising against a, you know, kind of an interesting horizon out in the middle of the sea, or maybe there's, I don't know, meteor showers or, you know, something like that. And I wanted to try something, see if I can get something kind of interesting going on in the sky while this whale kind of breaches. So, I don't know, it's kind of like one of those like magical moments. Okay. I'm giving a lot of pressure on this because it is such a big stamp, and I want to go for plenty of pressure. I'm not treating this like one stamp, just stamping it this way. You kind of have to press over here, 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 and here, like you're doing, I don't know, 5 different stamps, maybe 4, I don't know. That's the way this design was kind of conceived. It was conceived to be, you know, kind of like right, middle, and left. Or you can just use the top portion of it. Some people have used just this portion right here and stacked it and made kind of like this river. Very interesting use. And that's how that one was designed. Okay, we have it right there. And that's why I did it in a nice dark tone, because this is a dark piece of paper, so you're not going to be able to see the contrast of it very much, okay? Alright, so we first have to start off with a really wet ink pad to get as much of it down as we can, okay? Alright, now let's see here. Let's go with the whale. Get our composition kind of completed. It's going to be a fairly minimal composition as far as my imagery goes, and then let's see what happens in the toning process. Okay, let's see. Get this whale kind of right side up. It's at an angle in terms of the image, so this is hanging off a little bit, but I think that'll be okay. And I'll place it right about, here. It'd be kind of interesting to do it on the back side, but let's keep the main focus on the front side of the scene. Ew. My pad is really, really juicy. Now for like images like this, I don't need that much ink, so what I do is I kind of wipe it like that a little bit. Not hard, I'm not pressing into the pad, but I'm just kind of wiping off some of the ink so it's not overly inked and saturated. Okay, I'll have the whale kind of breaching, and it'll be breaking the horizon line, meaning jumping over the horizon line. It's not really jumping over it in the background, it's just in the foreground, so it's just breaking right over it like so. Okay. Alright. And let's see what we can do about making an interesting kind of sky. We have this large area in here now. I think what I'll do is, I think I'll stamp out the cloud cumulus. And I'll mask off some of my horizon line, okay? So I'm just going like that. Slightly under-masking it though, leaving a little bit of that horizon showing. See that right there? So that's probably about it. I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch. Maybe I'll go a little bit more, somewhere between 1/8, maybe 3/16 or so of an inch. That way I won't get this big gap in between my cloud and the horizon. Okay, I kind of want them to merge. We want overlapping to occur. Alright. Boy, now is this too wet for this? This is one of the most detailed stamps, so I don't want too much ink on it. Now I'm looking at a very wet pad, so being careful about not putting too much ink in there, because I don't want the detail to all get kind of gummed up in there. I'm going to wipe the edges of my cloud, because I am stamping it out in the darkest color that I can, black. Okay. Let me wipe off a little bit more here where it's going to overlap the whale a little bit. I don't want to get too much in my whale though, because I want to see that nice silhouette of the whale. Okay. And this paper's a little bit textured, so stamping this out, the cloud looks a little bit more textured than, say, something on a really smooth piece of paper like a glossy cardstock. Okay. that looks good to me right there, actually. Something like that. Let's back this out a little bit. And I'll put some more on this side. Same thing, slightly under mask. Okay, let me do something. I'm creating a little bit of a ridge here on the back, and I don't want too much of that, so because when I stamp this out, I want this to be nice and flat. If there's a ridge back there, it won't stamp evenly, so let's go about like so. Okay. Alright. It's a nice soft impression of the cloud. Stamping it in kind of a textured matte paper. Okay, go for something like this. It's looking a little bit symmetrical, of course, because there's 2 and 2 right here. Let's alter that a little bit. Even though I want these to read as kind of one image, right and back in here, it's way too symmetrical. Which you can do sometimes. I want to do a lesson sometimes on dramatic balance and dramatic imbalance. But this isn't the one I want to have dramatic balance on. Okay, let's go for another cloud up here and we'll stack it just to change things up a touch. Okay, yeah, it looks better. It looks better as a whole, even though it's supposed to read like this, and then this, or this, and then people open it like that. I still want it to read well, kind of both ways. Alright? So these are really fun to do, by the way. I really enjoy doing, I don't know, it's not really a 2-page spread because it's, front and back. But in a sense, that's the way it kind of ends up in many ways. In terms of, I don't know, sequential aesthetics, reading one thing and flipping around out back, so I don't know. I guess if you get really technical about it, it's almost 3. You're talking about one composition here. You flip it around, you see a second composition, then you open it up, and it's really the 3rd composition. So you want it to be able to read well in all 3 ways. It doesn't have to read perfectly in all 3 ways, but you want it to read well. Alright, so now this is the horizon line is kind of a little bit diffused here, so what we want to do is bring a tone in right here, and we want to darken the horizon a little bit, and then we'll darken some of the sky, and we'll do some kind of, I don't know, the one thing that I was really thinking about doing here is kind of these little swirly touches. I don't know if there's special effects, but kind of the effects that we're going after, little embellishments, which I think the scene will really be about in the end, okay? So what I'm doing right now is I'm masking off my horizon line right here, okay? That's where the seaside cove ended and the sky began. I'm just going to take my sponging tool here, and I'm just wiping this in from the outside, and it goes on really beautifully, smoothly, okay? Just started off on the outside, and I'm just barely touching it, okay? I'm streaking it across, yeah, but I'm not putting pressure on it, and I'm building it up a little bit stronger right here, and as it moves down here, it diffuses, and it diffuses from this way inward, okay? And I'll give my horizon a little bit stronger application, then I'll just use this and drag it across this way and go lighter. So it's going from wet to dry. So it's doing this type of thing, okay? Out to in. And that's how you get a stronger horizon like that, okay? We'll have to do the same thing from this side, but I'll put some more kind of streaks in here too. But why don't we address the horizon first, okay? Like that. Try to match it up as best as you can. Okay. Let's see if I can do this. It's kind of coming from... I have to switch my hands right here because I'm right-handed. Okay, kind of leaving a little bit of light around that whale. Okay, now let's take this off and let's do some more toning in. I'll add some more imagery, but I'm just going to start off with this right now. Adding a little bit of tone in between some of these waves, under the crests of the waves, but overall just kind of adding in some streaks of this blackness and thus defining some streaks of lightness, okay? So don't tone in everything, kind of leave it a little bit oscillated in here like that. Leave some streaks in here, so coming in here like that. And that gives it more of an illusion of it being, you know, kind of a varied surface that, you know, something that's reflective would be, such as, you know, water or a body of water. Okay, kind of starting to define a little bit more, like so. See that? Let's come on this side. It's kind of a fun way to work, and I mean, it's when you're doing this on this dark paper too, it's, you know, there's not a whole lot of ways you can go in terms of colors. I mean, if I toned in, you know, blue on the top of this, you wouldn't even be able to see it, so you have to kind of go darker, and just going with some grayscale is, you know, what you have to work with. Maybe you can go with a really dark blue, but I don't know if you really need to, but kind of adding this down like this in this kind of manner is, I don't know, it's different. It's like, I don't know, it gives you a different look. There's a different kind of emotional quality to it, I would say. It just feels different, you know, depending on kind of, I don't know, whatever kind of medium you're using, which is always a good thing. You want your media to be as versatile as possible, you know, in terms of rubber stamps. So Rubber stamps by nature, they should be one of the most malleable types of art tools you can come across, you know, by the very nature of it. They're, you know, rubber stamps are about replication, right? But how you replicate is all up to you, alright? I mean, it has quite a different feel to it than, you know, like a glossy cardstock like that, okay? Alright, let's define some of these clouds now, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here a little bit and put a little bit of tone around the top of the clouds, and hopefully I'll define the clouds a little bit. As far as the top surface like that, see if I put a little bit of tone around it like so, like up here, then that top layer, it'll kind of define like the top layer of clouds. Kind of creates a nice mood, I would say. Like I said, there's a different kind of emotional quality to this. Maybe it's because there's less contrast in here, so, you know, things just kind of feel different when there's less contrast. I usually like a lot of contrast, but, you know, in a situation like this, I'm thinking more along the lines of, you know, some kind of evening at the beach or something like that, where you just hear kind of nature, and there's a certain type of stillness, you know, there's kind of a dampening of sound in the sea air, you know, with all the kind of moisture in the air. That was my favorite time to go surfing, was at night. I enjoyed doing it next to a pier where there was some light, of course, so you can see a little bit, but it was just really enjoyable being kind of out in the water at night. No one else out there, usually. Okay, kind of adding that in, like so. Kind of adding a little bit of a vignette around the edges, left and right side. Okay. I'm achieving a little bit of variation here, just applying a little bit more black ink in some areas. Now, just to reiterate, you'll see what I'm doing right here. See this right here? That's like a, I don't know, maybe a 15 or 20% gray when I do that. So see, when I'm applying this, I'm not doing this, okay? Except in the areas that I really want it dark, but for the most part, it's gone like this. And when you're laying down such a light value of black, in this case gray, you'll have a lot of control over it. You're not going to get these kind of like unexpected marks, okay? And you want to manipulate this and get it to work in your favor. So what I'm doing is I just use those repeated touches like that, because any one stroke, it's not going to be some kind of intrusive thing, so mark, so you really don't get, you know, you'll really reduce, I should say, the number of kind of unexpected, unintentional, undesired marks when you kind of work things in a nice gradual manner. This is the same thing that I do on glossy cardstock as well. And you'll be able to manipulate things very easily because you're doing it with kind of repetition and, I would say patience, but I don't know. I mean, this card is almost done in terms of the toning process, and this is, you know, it's about 20 minutes or so. I don't know. My timer on my clocks here says, you know, 25, but, you know, because I'm blabbing here too. I don't know. I guess that doesn't slow me down, but I don't know. This is a large scene here too. You know, we're talking about, you know, not quite 8. It's probably like an 8 by 10, I'm guessing. But very fast and very fast, very fun. I don't see this kind of this building up slowly process as tedium. It's just kind of, you know, you have this scene and it's kind of imagine you have, you know, a dial of 10 clicks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know. And number 10 is your final result. Well, each click is going to be a little bit more precarious, you know, the fewer clicks you have, but if you now have a dial that says, you know, has 1,000 clicks or something like that, then you're just kind of clicking one little step at a time, and it breaks up the process, and in doing so you have so much more control over kind of the end result, you know, of what you're doing. Alright, so that looks pretty good as far as my sky goes, and overall, but the thing that I'm missing now is I'm missing something that can bring this a little bit more variety and texture, okay? So we'll add in some things like white inks and just different pigment ink applications within here, but let's also go in here and add a little bit of texture, say down in the foreground as well, right? So I want to add some kind of streaks in here of, where is it? Like some reed stamps. You know, it's kind of like beach grass or something, right? Both corners, and I can add a little bit of texture down here too with the use of I'm thinking the tiny rocks. I could use pebbles as well. Maybe I'll use both, but let me go get those too. Okay, this is the pebbles and this one's the tiny rocks. Oh, let's just, I don't know, let me try them both. We'll see how it comes out. We'll give it a little bit of a graveled kind of texture down here. Just going to stamp it out in black. Let me see. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, I guess you can. This, when wet, will read a certain way. But one of the things I'm noticing is it dries on this dark matte paper. It kind of lightens a little bit, so what I'll do is I will come back into that area down there with some additional texture. Okay, I'll use the solid image of the tiny rocks. So you can kind of layer your textures, okay, accordingly. When I say accordingly, it's to your, to your desired kind of finish. Whatever looks good to you. Kind of trust your instincts, you know, when it comes to your pieces. Alright. We don't have so much of sandy beach now. We have more of a pebbled, you know, textured one. Boy, I washed these tack and peels off, and it's so sticky, so tacky. Okay, so we have that right now. It's a little glary. Let me see. That's what it looks like, kind of more like that. In person, I should say. There's my textures down there, where it meets the waves, the crashing waves. Now let me go in here. Let me kind of define the edge a little bit more. You know, where that kind of crashing waves, the white water kind of rolling in meets that gravel or shore. A little bit more in there just to define that line. Okay. See where I've kind of gone in here and I've added a little bit more tone. It doesn't have to be a mystery of where to add some additional shading, because I can see it on the design itself. So like underneath these waves, you can add a little bit of color, you know, so when it, you know, or tone in this case. I'm just adding a little bit of tone, kind of like right underneath that area, because it's darker on the image, okay? I'm not going to do it in every spot, but you can see up here where it was darker. You just go in there and, you know, you can use that as kind of your, I don't know, starting point as far as your shading goes. Just kind of reiterate what's going on in the design itself. So that's a little bit more defined there. It kind of, and again, when it dries, it kind of mellows out a little bit, and you don't see it as much, but okay, kind of round it into form a little bit more. Alright, now let's start to have some pigment ink fun. Looking for my top for this. Here we go. Okay, so we have our kind of grayscale gradations defined. Let's take a look at this as a single piece, and then that one looks kind of interesting. And that's as a whole. Look at that kind of blue glow that we have going on here. Alright, so let's see what we have here. I need some, I need my Q-tips. This one's used. I need to get another one here. And we'll start to define some of our clouds and things like that within the scene. Maybe add a little bit down to our foam, kind of spindrift. That spindrift is the kind of the white water coming off the crest of the wave right here, and kind of bring a little bit more attention to that breaching whale. Now, one of the things I kind of wanted to play around with too is I have some different colors of pigment inks. Okay, I have, or different values. I have opacities, I guess, transparent, a little bit more. Well, this is a little bit less transparent, this one, the Hero Hues. But I have Robin's Egg Blue here, and I haven't really played around with colored pigment inks over colored paper yet, but I thought I would play around with that a little bit and see what we come up with. So, I don't know. It's all experiment, right? And kind of playing around and testing things, so let's test some of that. Okay, let's see what we can do here. I have my fantastic stamping art tool here in the form of this Q-tip. I'm saying the brand because, you know, some brands just, they're not real cotton or something like that, and they're real tightly bound. This one I kind of want to fray it a little bit and kind of just loosen it up a little bit because I want kind of a soft application of it. And if you want a soft application, you have to soften the tip a little bit, unravel it. Alright, let's see what we have here. We have these clouds, and I want them to be top lit. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rip my paper towel, hopefully a little kind of a rounded form like so. Alright? There might be additional tearing going on just to get it into a little bit different shape. But that looks good to me. And this is going to look kind of strange if you haven't seen me do this before. This is white pigment ink. This pad happens to be very dry, which would be perfect for this application. If you're using a wet one, then just barely dab into it as you take it down, okay? And you want a very, again, just light application, just like I was doing with the black, to get a grayscale. Same thing with this. You want just a very light touch of it to be applied. So it looks like that, okay? You can hardly see anything right there. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of give it a few gradations, okay? Where I want it heavier or whiter, I'll just do more taps. But you kind of want to work a small area, and then just as that develops, what you do is you kind of move it down and away from the lightest area, the heaviest application. What you'll have is a nice gradation of. It's not going to be white because it's kind of more translucent, so you'll have the blue coming through it, but give this, you know, variation of blue, I guess. So let's take a look here and let's see what I'm doing. So you can see it's kind of happening gradually. See that right there? I think I'm going out too far out that way. It's a little bit. So you can just kind of wipe it off like that. It's like it almost becomes like chalk or something like that. Let's kind of come back here. kind of redefine the edge a little bit. When I say redefine the edge, I'm kind of defining the edge of my cloud with this torn paper towel piece. This pad is almost too dry. I need to, maybe I'll need to add a little bit of ink to it. Okay, so there's one cloud right there. And again, it kind of looks weird. You kind of have to keep adding it in different areas. Okay, so I'll define these other clouds out here as well. Okay. But otherwise, what you have is, the reason why I say it looks kind of weird is because it's an isolated texture in one little area. So what you do is you have to kind of bring that texturing, and in this case it kind of represents lighting. You have to kind of introduce it to other areas, because if light is hitting something in the scene in a certain manner, if all of these objects are within the same scene, then you have to kind of dress them accordingly or similarly. Okay, so kind of building it up. I can almost just dab it in here without that mask. Finding it looks fine. Maybe I'll put a little bit more of it in some areas, less in others, just to vary it. You don't want everything kind of all exactly the same. Look at that, I tone over my fingernails for some reason. I don't know if I was going like that. Alright, this is going to be my version of editing here. Usually you'd do it like a time lapse and speed this up so I can kind of address more of these clouds, but I'm going to pause it here for a couple minutes and address this side of my scene with this pigment ink, and then I'll come out of it and I'll show you what I'm going to do on the other side. Okay, this is what we have right here. It's a little bit lighter in here, and notice how this gets darker over here. I've put that vignette on here, so what I'm saying is this side of the clouds are darker. So, that being said, I would have less highlighting over here than in the lighter portion. So it's heavier on this side, okay, and lighter in terms of my application of that pigment ink in this side. Alright, now the opposite is going to be true on this side. I think I'll go, because it's going from dark over here and lighter on this side, then the clouds on the left side of the page are going to be addressed, you know, having the lightest portions on the right side. So this one's on the left side, this one's on the right side, because they're on the other side of the composition. Okay? So I will add that in, and I will come back and you'll see how that looks. Okay, we have the left side of the scene addressed. And you can see my kind of interior lighting in many ways. And it's just because, I mean, there isn't really a definitive source of light in here like a moon or something like that, but just for the very fact that it's kind of darker on the outside like that, I've kind of center lit these clouds in terms of the lighting direction in here, okay? It doesn't have to be like that, but I don't know. It seems to make sense in terms of kind of this being a world unto itself, okay? It's not, you know, when you're doing kind of pieces like this, you don't have to think about it in terms of being, you know, just part of a greater whole. You know, think about these little scenes, your cards, as kind of their own kind of universe or whatever. That's what exists right there, you know, and you think about it that way. For me, I think it's just an easier way it's an easier approach to things, because you don't have to kind of analyze things so much. You're just saying that if there's light over there, that's where that's supposed to be, okay? So you don't need to overthink things. Now, I just talked about this being dark over here and center lit, yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way, okay? We can have things left lit, you know, and have the lighting all on one side or something like that too. And if that's your scene, then so be it. Okay, now we're going to we have that texture going up in the sky there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of create a relationship between that texture and other objects within the scene. So maybe there's a little bit of a kind of a mist, a big spray splash being created by this breaching whale. So I'm putting some of that, you know, that mist in the air. We'll do a little bit with some gel pen dots as well in there. Okay, let's take a look at some areas down here now within the design. Okay, I'm going to put some of these splashing, crashing waves and a little bit of a soft light by illuminating some of that light. Or illuminating some of that moisture, I should say. Okay, so that's what it looks like. There's that kind of like that little bit of a glow. Okay. You don't have to do that over everything, though. Kind of going back to my lessons on lighting, easy scene lighting. It's kind of all about the oscillation of it, okay? Now see, I'm not going to put that really in the darkness down here, but I'm putting it in the lighter areas. On a paper like this, there's kind of a little bit of a different kind of a spirit to this, because I did start off with a piece of blue paper, dark blue paper at that. So it's not like, normally I would kind of start on my lighter areas, places that I've retained the lightness of a white piece of paper, you know, after I've done the toning. But on this, it's a little bit different. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of laying down a little bit of this ink, so that it doesn't necessarily look, I guess it looks a little bit white, but it's kind of a grayish, you know, a value of blue, really, because it's translucent, okay? The paper is showing through, or whatever is underneath there, okay? Now, on something like this, now, remember, most of your pads are going to be wetter than mine, so really kind of blot it off, okay? The thing that makes this technique easy is the dryness of your applicator, okay? If it's very, very dry, and you can make it dry too just by blotting it off, okay? The drier it is, the easier it is, okay? It just means that it's going to take a little bit longer to tap out a lighter value because it's so dry on here, but it's easier though because you don't get those kind of unexpected marks, and it's just easier to manipulate when you have, you know, that little touch down there came about by really quite a few taps, so you don't have to be so, you know, proficient as a, you know, someone doing like Chinese calligraphy or something like that, where it's all like, you know, spontaneous and instantaneous, okay? You know, you have to have a lot of skill for that type of, and practice for that type of mark. But this, you know, where you can kind of dab this down, and you can dab it down a lot before you can even barely see anything, that means a lot of control And we're not talking forever, you know? I mean, that little glow right there, you know, that's I don't know, take less than a minute, so we're not talking a huge amount of time. All right? But if you get something that you kind of don't want and you have to kind of rub it out, then that's going to take time too, so just kind of build it up slowly from the beginning and it'll be really easy. Okay? And also, like, I don't know how something's going to look everywhere that I put it, but I can kind of put a little bit down, and if I like it, then I just add more. So it's for me too, in terms of my decision making goes. I can kind of add a little bit, and if I like it, then I'll add more. And if I don't like it, it's no big deal at all because I can barely see it. Oops, too much, right? See that? I guess I hit a wet spot on my pad, but just flip it around to the side without any ink and just kind of spread it around or remove some of it, and you'll get it to the kind of the state that you want it to be in, okay? It's almost like, I'm trying to think of what it is in the spirit of it feels more like kind of laying down some pastels. Speaking of that, you can probably use some pastels on this type of card. Go on with some light blue, maybe black, white. You can use a Conte crayon if you know what that is. Maybe we'll do that. Okay. Okay, kind of coming around. It's a little bit too light there still. Kind of wipe that off a little bit. Just kind of buff it out a little bit. And it'll come off. Alright, let's play around with some things here. Let me try some of this robin's egg. No idea what it's going to look like. Maybe it's a little bit too kind of warm blue, but yeah, let's just, I don't know, let's see how it's going to look. I haven't really used this very much, so it's not overly wet, sloppy wet. It's probably 10 years old, that's why. 10 years old and practically brand new as far as my usage of it goes, but I don't know. Let's see what this is going to look like. If I can see it at all, I have no idea. Okay. All right. When I blotted off some of it, I could barely see it. Now I can see it. Alright. Yeah, it's kind of working the same manner as the white, except it's just blue. It's a very pale blue, but maybe that will make a nice kind of value addition to the scene. You know, instead of going just white, we'll work a little bit of that blue. It kind of has a little bit of a glowy feel to it. You can tell. See right there. So there's white and there's blue. There's a blue down here, but there's a white up the top. Okay, so see that? So I'm kind of adding it below the white areas, just to kind of transition it off into a different hue. Well, it looks okay, I guess. It's subtle, that's for sure. And it is blue instead of white. I kind of like it. the sky a touch. I feel like this is kind of like a form of painting. Someone once said that in art school, I don't know if it was an instructor, but they said that when you're doing pastels, pastels are a form of painting. It's just using dry pigment instead of then. I mean, these are pigment inks, so, and they're kind of thick just because they come in a pad. I don't know. I guess they're an ink definition, but it is like a form of paint, though. I guess it feels more like painting in terms of you know, you're kind of working with some degree of opacity, or you know, in this case it's a little bit more translucent, but. Alright, so there's a little bit of blue happening up there. I don't know if you can see it. I mean, I can see it because I know where I put it, kind of. But there's a little bit of tonal shift. Or maybe not shift, but kind of an extension. It looks pretty good. So I guess with whatever type of paper you're working with, whatever foundation, if you're working with like a brown paper or something like that, you know, why not go into like the ambers or the... I don't know, here's yellow, but I don't know, if you have kind of a range of pigment inks, this is, I don't know, it seems like a pretty interesting way to work. You know, to give yourself kind of a different look, if you haven't done this before. I haven't seen too many scenes done that way, but like I said, I always say in these videos, I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever do this, so, and there's probably a lot more people that are a lot better at it than I am, but I don't know, that's why these are kind of more play, experimental videos than instructional videos. I'm just kind of blabbing out loud. Alright, so that's different down there. I like that blue though, it's kind of a nice glow to it, I guess. Alright, now let's try something now. We need to get a little bit more bold with our applications of things. So let's try to... I was going to do this with the white ink, but let's do this with the pigment ink. Okay, I'm going to take my stylus tool here, and let's add in some additional streaks of color. So, let's see. Need to get enough ink going in this stylus tool here. Okay, I'm going for like something like that. Boy, I really do need to sop up a lot of this ink in here. Let's see what I have. Okay, something like that. Alright, this is going to be a very, very dry application. Where am I adding this? I'm kind of adding it to the areas that are lighter to begin with, and hopefully I'll kind of achieve a little bit of a kind of a glowing surface. In this case it'll have a bit of a blue tone, bluish tone. Boy, it sure looks white to me though. I don't know why. Did I use white in this before? Not sure. I don't think I did. It really wants to apply very, very slowly. I like the feel of it as it's being applied. See that kind of area in there? I find that when I kind of layer it down, it's allowing me to kind of pull it in the direction that I'm kind of going in. And it kind of diffuses it a little bit. I kind of want to bring more attention to that whale, so I'm kind of illuminating the area around it a touch. Adding some of it to the foreground down here in these rocks. See, that's lighter than over here, right? It's because I put some of that pigment ink in there. So this is what's going on. It's a real streaky, kind of laying some of this above some of the shaded areas, okay? So it's like multi-layered. Kind of going with the dark, then light over the top of it, although it's not too light. Alright, now let's address these areas up in the sky. See this kind of haze up here and right in here where it's lighter? Let's add a little bit of lighting to that. Kind of have to be careful around that, you know, the fold, because it's kind of applying a little bit differently to that folded area. Kind of adding a nice, kind of wispy kind of look, I guess. It's a little bit more painterly. Going into it like this. That has a different feel to it, doesn't it? I guess because it's a, you know, a completely different technique, you know, than a lot of the other scenes that I do, but it really does. It has its own kind of spirit. And I'd have to say this is a very easy technique. It just, things, I don't know, it blends. Everything goes on so slowly in terms of the surface. I mean, this isn't a long format card or anything like that, but it just really blends out nicely. Kind of has a nice spirit for the, you know, the seaside cove and that whale too. Okay, so let's take a look again. There's the whale. Go like that. Alright. Just like I do with my dye-based inks, I'm going to layer some tones. Let's go to the white now again. I'm tempted to use the same one. Let's use this one. Here's my heart-shaped tool here. Probably not the best one to use on that, but... Alright, let's try the hero hues here. Let's go to the color box, a little bit more transparent. Okay. Okay, I'm going to my kind of wetter one, and boy, that is really wet, so I'm going to have to really take a lot of that ink off. So I'm kind of loading up and then removing. Alright, kind of going with the light touch. Okay, kind of giving me those nice little streaks, kind of introducing the scene to kind of a nice texture in the sky, little wisps. Kind of having to kind of develop your own. It's kind of like developing somewhat of a, whatever your style, when you're doing kind of a different medium or using the medium in a different way. Okay, there's that. Okay, let's add some of that down in the water now. Okay, so something like that. Kind of tweaking the kind of the value range, aren't we? By doing these little kind of highlights here and there. Putting a few highlights around the whale. Kind of to bring them out of the background a little bit more. Like so. Okay. The word kind of ethereal comes to mind for some reason. I'm looking at this. Highlighting some more of those little waves. You can see I'm kind of using this tip a little bit differently. Yeah, doing these little flicks, so kind of trying to figure out the way that this ink will apply best. Okay. We need one of those recordings that kind of has the, whatever, the whale songs, calling going out. Okay, let's take a look here. And trying to decide if I want some more texture in here. I can have more in the sky with some kind of subtle formations up there. Let's do that. Maybe I'll do it in the blue. Let's see. I don't know. Blue or white? Not sure. Let me try the blue. Blue, in theory, would be more subtle, so if you're not sure if you want to do something, maybe just try it in a very light shade at first. Can't see anything. Try to apply a little bit more. I can't see anything over there. I think I'll have to go darker. I can maybe okay, I don't have enough ink on here. There's barely anything coming off of this. I need to really squeeze into this this pad. Gosh. Maybe this pad is kind of dry. There we go. Well, maybe. Okay, there we go. It's kind of funny, when I get enough ink on here, it almost looks, when I start applying it onto the paper, I almost think it looks kind of a little bit more white against that background. You know, that colored background color paper. It's kind of there, kind of not. Let me see. Let's go to the white. Alright, enough fooling around. We need a little bit more contrast, to say the least. Alright, I still don't want to dip that blue into my white pigment ink. I don't think it'll ever come out. Unlike dye-based inks, it'll just blend in with one another. I don't want to have permanently stain my pigment ink, so let's go to the go back to the Q-tip. Okay, so a little bit of cloud formations coming in. What you can do is you can layer it a little bit, or a lot. Okay, all right, let's come over here, add some more over here. So it's kind of layering my textures. You know, we have those streaks in there. Now we can kind of go with a little bit more of a mechanical process, but in a very soft way. You know, with a ripped paper towel here. When I say mechanical, I'm just saying, you know, that with the use of a, you know, a mask and, you know, this process right here. Still very organic, I guess you could say, of a kind of application, but we are using a tool here. Okay, so like that. Alright, now I'm going to blend that out a touch. And maybe come down one more slight layer. Just for a little bit of, you know, textural contrast. Okay. Alright, so let's take a look. I think I'll kind of just blend these out a little bit more. I'm kind of going like right on the edge of that cloud and then coming up from it. Kind of, again, it's like an experiment. This is not a technique. It seems to work okay, though. Doesn't have to be the heart-shaped one. I don't know where this came from. Just like a test tip, but any type of sponging applicator would work, I would think. Even cosmetic sponges. Alright, let's see what we have here. Looks okay. This is kind of like going in and developing your own clouds. You can go kind of back and forth too. Let me try something here while we're experimenting. Let me go back to black and just, we'll make this, you know, kind of a circular process where you're, you know, you kind of add a little bit of white, go back and add black, white over it, black over that. Now that you can see where other things are, you can kind of let that influence where, you know, some of the shading would go again. It doesn't have to be kind of a, you know, single direction process. Okay. Sure looks different every step of the way. Hit my corners again a little bit. Alright, let's go for some extreme contrast here. Let's not get too crazy, but let's go for a little bit of highlighting. This is a blue pen, okay? And I'm just going in and adding some little details, okay? Where these little splashing rocks are. You can see where they are on the design, just as you can look on designs and see where the darker areas are on them. You can also see where the lighter areas are, okay? Like on the tops of these waves, the spindrift coming off the top and splashing, you know, waves in the foreground around your rocks. Those are light, right? So, just as you kind of darken and shadows, in the shadow areas of a design, you can look at the design itself and reference it, and kind of get some ideas on perhaps where you'd like to add a few little highlights, okay? It really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. In terms of where to start, you know, if you're interested in something, I certainly don't have to add this, but if you want to, and you don't know where to start, you can just kind of reference the design and see where there's kind of a similar texture that you might want to kind of employ in the scene, and start there. Alright, see that down there? This little kind of makes it a little bit more active, I guess you can say. We have these little specular lights on the ocean's surface. Maybe we can add some of that in. Specular light is light that's brighter than white. Now I'm adding it in blue here, but I'll probably go in and add a little bit of white to it too. Let's see if I can focus in there. Okay, you see that? I'm not adding it in the darkness much. I might add a few, but here's the whale splashing out of the water. I can put some splashes around it. Okay. A little bit glary. I kind of keep holding this up so it won't have the glare of the lights on it, so you can see a little bit more of a accurate indication of how that looks. Okay, boy, that is glary. Even though this is matte paper too, see? This is the same on this side as it is on this side. It looks completely different, doesn't it? Once you start adding in a little bit of tone, value, you turn this into this. So, I don't know, it looks to me, you know, when you're doing this type of thing, spatially, with very little, you know, tonal gradations, it really does have a pretty decent sense of space in here in terms of distance, I think. Going in here and just adding some of those little highlights and some of these little pebbles that we added down here, and the tiny rocks. Can you see that's what that looks like? Glowing little pebbles and whatnot. Alright, now I haven't forgotten, my camera's having a hard time focusing. There's not much tonal range in this. I haven't forgotten about some foreground here, so let's go ahead and add that in at this point in time. Okay, we're going to some black. I want this one really, really black. So let's go to the VersaFine. If there's a darker black, I don't know, you know? I don't know it. But it is a pigment ink, so kind of be aware of that when you're doing it. If you're stamping it on glossy paper, as I do sometimes, it really takes quite a long time to dry. But I'm fine with that, because it is a awesome, awesome black. It's really a true black. It's almost, I don't know, I would say that it's 100%. You know, there's a lot of black pads out there that are closer to like an 85 or 90%, but that one's really, really dark. Okay. Now it is wet, so it might dry a little bit more dull, but even so, it'll be nice and stark. That's a pretty good foreground to put on here, huh? Okay, so something like that. Alright, let's take a look. Okay. Now, let's add some of the lighter things in the scene. In the form of the white gel pen. Let me take a look here. One of these was working really good for me and one of them wasn't. This is my 0.7 Uniball Signo. My 1.0 always works fine. 1.0 millimeter, that is. Let's go with a more subtle one. Okay, I don't know how subtle it's going to be. It's probably going to be pretty light. I can get a really fine dot with this, which is what I'm going for. Okay. Kind of see it down here. See that white? See it up around the whale. Okay, let's do it on this side. Coming to life a little bit, coming to life a little bit in terms of contrast. Put in a little bit on the horizon. Alright, let me see if I can get a little bit on the whale too. Okay. Gonna knock it down a little bit on the whale. Okay. Just like that. I don't want too much though. I'm going to kind of buff some of it out so it looks a little bit duller on the whale, some of the whale. And let's go in and add a few little stars in the sky. tend to go overboard with my stars in the sky a lot of times, which isn't a bad thing. But sometimes I think, that's a little bit too much. Kind of vary your application of the stars a little bit. Where they're kind of clustered and loose. In other words, occasionally change the size of one, put a large one, just kind of scribble it in. Okay. Putting some more of this on the water's surface. Just so we know it's there a little bit. Okay. Applying a little pigment ink here. We'll put a little bit of glowing texture around maybe a couple of the larger stars. Something like that. Go over here and you have that one. All right. Bit of a different look. I'm going to see if I have a quote stamp for this. If I don't, it'll remain just as is. If not, we'll just leave it as is, just as a scene, okay? But sometimes having, let's take a look at that like that. Then we look at it like this, open it up, and we have this. I do have some space in here for a quote if I decide to do it. There's not a whole lot of texture or anything going on in there right now. But it might look interesting. Let me have a look and see. Okay, I think I found something. There were a couple quotes that I had in mind that would work very well with this one. This one says, "When it is darkest, we see the stars," and I think that would match very well with this. I'm going to do a test print on, it's just a scrap piece of paper I have right here. And I do this to kind of get my bearings. Let me put this more in the center here. I don't use a stamp positioner. I mean, you certainly could. It'd probably make things a little bit easier, but I just kind of wing it. All right. Ooh, that is really, really juicy. That might be too wet. Boy, let me see. Yeah, it's a little bit wet. It's my brand new Hero Arts pad. It is sopping wet. Boy. Let me kind of go in here and re-ink. Tell you what, I'm going to do something. That is so wet. I'm going to kind of dab off. It's mixing brands right here, but I'll go in my my other pad here that's dry. There's a lot of lint in here. Where's that from? Maybe it's from one of the pads. Okay, let's see. I kind of do this to get my bearings a little bit, just to make sure that I'm stamping it kind of not slanted. Okay, that's perfect right there. Now I just need to get that down. Alright, this is what I did. A little dab in the super juicy one. Boy, that is so wet. And then I'm dabbing off in my dry one. I think that lint is coming off my drier one. Okay, and hitting it right about right here. So, boy, let me see. Okay, good. When it's darkest, we see the stars. Alright, now I have to take a look at this now in terms of the context and overall. We have that quote in there now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it like this, look at it like this, and when opened up it looks like that. Alright. Trying to decide if there's anything more than I need. I think I'm going to... This over here is a little bit... It stands out a little bit too much to me. I mean, it's supposed to, it's text, but what I want to do is I want to bring in a similar value to it around it, okay? So I'm going to bring in... Introduce a little bit more, kind of in a subtle way, some little highlights here around it, just to kind of balance that off just a touch. Come out here just a little bit. Alright, see that? I put some little highlights down there just to kind of bring that together a little bit. So we have that there and there. Alright, now there's other things that I can do inside here in terms of creating some kind of look. It's the same type of paper as the outside, and I think that would be a good idea. Maybe some stars. When it's darkest, we see the stars. And I think maybe just putting some tone up here and putting a few little dots or something like that would be kind of cool to create kind of a continuity between the exterior like this. If you give a card to someone, so they look at it like this, they look like this, they open it up and they see that, and then if they open it up here and there's kind of nothing in here, you know, there might be, I don't know, I wouldn't say that's a letdown or something like that, because, you know, it's mostly about the outside anyway. But I think what I'll do is I'll bring in some tone in here and just to create some kind of sequential aesthetics going. So I'll figure out what to do there. But I'll let this dry a little bit. I think this down here is a little bit dry, wet, and that's a little bit wet right now too, so kind of figure out something to do on the inside of this kind of different looking card. Okay, give it a little bit of time, a little bit of drying time. Okay, I just did a bad mistake, not in terms of the scene, but I just shot my last segment here and I realized that I didn't turn on my microphone, so I'm just going to tell you what I did here, and we'll see how this edits, but I don't know, my videos get a little bit too long anyways. I didn't do anything too big, but one of the things that I mentioned was when this pigment ink dries, it dries darker, okay? So it goes on much lighter and it dries darker, but it kind of dried a little bit more mellow, and it seemed to blend in with the scene more, and I kind of like that, so I'm really good with that not being as it was freshly stamped. I usually like freshly stamped things in terms of dye-based inks or something like that because they're nice and super saturated and dark. But then this one, I don't mind it kind of sitting into the scene a little bit more and kind of blending with it. It takes on more of the tone of kind of the clouds out there instead of standing out so much. Now, here's what I did in my last segment, and I thought about leaving it in, but I may be completely silent. But what I did was, you know how I streaked in the dark areas of my sky on this side? Now we have the theme of it. When it is darkest, we see the stars. When you add a quote like that, it really kind of sets the tone as far as the theme of the scene. So what we have is, in terms of sequential aesthetics, is we have this. Then we read the quote, when it's darkest we see the stars, and we open it up. And we have the 2-page spread in here. So the stars are the kind of the theme, and what we get is when someone opens up their card, right? I just kind of carried out that same kind of streaky idea of adding in some black tone, going in here and adding in these streaks of black color into the interior. So we have this kind of sequential aesthetics running. That's has something in common with the front in terms of these streaks in here. I don't want to add in all these clouds and textures in here because I wanted it to kind of be something where, you know, when you get this going like that, then we open it up like that. This is a pretty busy scene right here, full of a lot of things like that. So when you go into the interior, you know, it's just something kind of more mellow, and it's like a resting point for, you know, our eyes and mind, okay? And that would be, you know, you don't want to create things too complicated because this is where you, if you're a stamper, you might stamp some sort of saying or word stamp, you know, based on the, you know, whatever occasion that card might be, you know, thinking of you or whatever. Or you can just kind of write, you know, things out. And I just kind of sign my name down here in the white pen. I would do this in white, you know, across here, or you can do it this way, going across this way if you wanted to. But I don't know, it's just kind of one of those things. Here's the, if you recognize constellations, this is Orion right here. And I kind of add a little bit more of the that little glowing effect with a little bit more of the pigment ink around there, and I made this little shooting star or comet right over here. Something a little bit more whimsical, you know, for someone. I don't know if you're giving it to someone, they can make their wish, you know, the shooting star there. So it's kind of a little fun little element. But anyways, alright, there. I spared you from, I don't know, a half an hour segment by forgetting to turn on my microphone and watching me, you know, do streaks of color, do exactly what I did on the front side of that. Maybe that's what I should do more often. Cut down on the length of some of these videos. But anyways, it's one of the more, I don't know, kind of ethereal pieces that I've done, just from the very nature of the range of values in it. Sometimes if you do something, you know, with a kind of a narrower range of values, I mean, there's something that's really light, but it's in a very small area. It can change kind of the spirit of a scene. It might be the difference of like a full moon scene on, you know, image on this scene, you know, with a lot of really super spectacular glittery light. This one that's very subdued, so it has kind of a different emotional spirit to it. And I like both, but this one was a good one for me to learn some new tweaks in terms of using some of the blue pigment ink, and I wasn't really even quite sure if I could tell the difference, but I think I can, you know. It's hard to say because it's already down there, but some of these streaks in here with that blue, same thing down here, but I don't know, it was kind of an interesting addition to this kind of still kind of formulating technique of pigment inks on dark matte paper for me. And I think I want to get some different colors of this, you know, these papers, and do some different experiments. I think I have a green, than I have black for sure, but having something that that black will read on is also really nice. So again, sequential aesthetics. Someone opens their card, they pull this out of an envelope, they get that. This is how they would look at it probably, and then they might look it around it back like so. There's your quote. And then when they open it up, they have this, okay? It's kind of a lot of things going on in it in terms of the imagery and little details and whatnot. And then what they do is they take that and they open it up right here, and then you have your final piece, so it's kind of a little bit, I don't know if it's quiet, semi-quiet, a little bit quiet, fairly loud in terms of, relatively speaking, in terms of everything going on. And then they take this, and here it is, a little interior card. They go to rest, a rest, for their eyes and whatnot, and then just kind of read whatever you had to say about it, So it's kind of a little, beginning, whatever, third act, I don't know, whatever, conflict or whatever, like in reading a book or whatever, the peak or whatever, I can't think of the thing. And then kind of the conclusion where you kind of go and mellow out a little bit, so. Anyways, really fun scene, I love that. And I've done other ones like that in the past, but I think this one's a little bit more developed in terms of the look, so I wanted to get back to it because I really enjoyed working in this kind of style. It's pretty easy to do too. Your inks just really just blend beautifully on this paper. I don't know what kind of paper it is. It's just, I don't know, it's a fairly smooth, matte, just cardstock, I guess, and it's just pre-folded for the cards. And you don't have to go with the pre-folded one, but I'm lazy, as I mentioned, and I like it pre-folded. It does pick up a little bit more ink and it makes it darker, but I don't know. That's not something that I really care about, so it doesn't really bother me. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning into the channel.